Welcome back to How I Made It Through. I'm excited today. I have this wonderful author, Karin McClean, is with me, and she's going to share the story about her new book is Bright Days Do Come. And it is about the story of losing her brother and in an automobile accident, and she came close to losing her own life in the same tragedy. Karin has studied hundreds of accounts of near-death experiences to gain an understanding of where her brother is and where we all go when we leave this earth. And this story, I have read some of this story, and it is just an amazing, deep look at a very tragic event, but in a way that brings us all some uh, hope or brightness about going through a really challenging time. So, Karin, I welcome you to the show to join me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Bernadette. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, it is. When I bring people together on the show that can not only talk about, how they made it through an experience, but often when we have an experience, it changes our lives. I know it changed my life when I went through the loss of my husband and the awakening that I had. And many of my guests have had these experiences where they can go back to that one moment in their life that everything changed. So could you share with us the story of the accident that happened and the loss of your brother, and take us back to what happened that day?
Sure. Um, and yeah, basically before the accident and after the accident, that was a complete change in my life. So, leading up to the accident, I had just finished my first week of college. My family and I decided to take a quick trip to a town that is about 4 hours from our house to support a friend who was running in a marathon that they held there annually. So my parents are divorced. So my dad wasn't with us, but there were five of us in the car. I'm the oldest of four siblings, so I was 18. My 16-year-old sister Erica drove us that day. She had just gotten her license and wanted to get some more experience. So she hopped into the driver's seat, and my mom was next to her. And then I was behind the driver. My 14-year-old sister Kristen was next to me in the back seat. And then the youngest member of our family, my little brother Brian, who was 9 years old, sat in the very back. We were in a station wagon. And we were driving along. We had been on the road for almost an hour, and my sister leaned in to get a sip of some Coca-Cola my mom had for her to kind of help keep her alert. And as she leaned in for that sip, the car drifted and we overcorrected. And the car rolled, I was told 4 times, and we had been heading south. And when our car finally stopped rolling, we were on the opposite side of the freeway facing north. And during the process of the car rolling, the three of us in the back, so me, my sister Kristen, and little Brian, were all thrown from the car. My mom and sister in the front seats had their seatbelts on, and they were trapped inside the crushed car and had to wait for the jaws of life to get them out. Luckily, there was an emergency room doctor traveling right behind our car, and he was key in saving my life and my legs. When he approached me, he thought, if this girl lives, she won't have her legs. But he had his medical kit with him, and I had a lot of injuries, including both of my femurs were broken, and one was compound, where the bone sticks out through the skin, and I was losing so much blood. And he happened to have a bottle of saline in his medical kit, which he poured into my open wound, which significantly reduced the chances of it becoming infected. And so he was just crucial in saving my life. And my other leg was femur was broken as well, but my hip was also dislocated and there was no blood flow getting to my leg. And with the help of volunteers, he was able to push it back into place. And it's just a miracle that he was there. And so many people, droves of people stopped to help, and so many of them had medical backgrounds. There were 10 registered nurses there. There were firemen, there were some EMTs, and none of that included the ambulance crew who came to help us. So we were already getting a lot of support by the time the ambulance and
Yeah.
all of those medical people arrived.
Just explaining that part of it, when I read that, even if you were to stop there, and it would have been the most incredible story. But the fact,
Yeah.
as you go and explain a little further all of the injuries that you had and what happened with the family, but it just so it's like we all need a little bit of a deep breath just even hearing that part.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. So, but please share and take your time and, but share a little bit more about what happened and to your siblings and your mom that day and all of that.
Yeah. So when the car stopped rolling, the first thing Erica, the driver, saw was blood dripping down from her scalp. She had incurred a cut, and she just, uh, it's heartbreaking. She just, I get emotional to this day, even though it was 33 years ago. But she just, was in shock. And she said everything felt magnified. And she just looked at my mom and said, "What happened? Was I driving?" And as that horrific realization sunk in, she wanted to curl up and die.
Mm.
And my mom, she broke a clavicle and dislocated her elbow. And my mom, she could hear, they were trapped in the car and they couldn't she couldn't turn her head with her broken clavicle and see who was who was screaming and who wasn't. She could hear some screaming and she didn't know who it was, which of her kids were okay, which ones were hurt. She had no idea what had happened. And for a mother to experience that, I honestly can't imagine. It's amazing that my mom has done as well as she has.
Hmm.
And then my sister Kristen, who was also thrown, she broke one femur and she got a closed head injury. Luckily, it didn't last too long and she recovered from that just fine. But for the first while, she couldn't remember very much. And as for me, I broke both of my femurs, as I told you, but I also I kind of have to go down my body to remember all the injuries. I cracked the back of my skull, which makes your eyes swell and blacken. So when I first woke up, I could only see a sliver of everything around me and everything seemed dark. And I don't remember the accident. This is all that I've been told.
Hmm.
Um, so I cracked my skull, I shattered my left orbital floor, and I landed on the left side of my body. So I got some nerve damage on the left side of my face. So my left side of my face wasn't quite as responsive as the right side. Um, and I fractured some bones in my jaw. I broke my clavicle. Both lungs were collapsed. Both femurs were broken. That hip was dislocated, and my left knee was also broken. And yeah.
It's amazing. I'll let you go further and talk about your little brother, and then we can go back and talk about your journey.
Great. Yeah, so Brian, he landed on the asphalt and hit his head really hard. He went into cardiac arrest, and the medical team started doing CPR on him. And after about 5 minutes, he was revived. And he and my sister and I, who were thrown, were all we were initially brought to a local hospital and then life flighted to larger hospitals that can handle trauma. And my brother went to the children's hospital, and once he got up there, they discovered that he didn't have any neural activity in his brain, and the only thing keeping him alive are the machines. And they told my parents that there was no chance of recovery. And so the following day, my parents had to make that heart-wrenching decision to have his life support turned off. And meanwhile, uh, Kristen and I were in the hospital. We were fighting for our own lives, and I just can't imagine the trauma that my parents endured with all
Mhm.
of that. And
Yeah.
when I woke up, I don't know what day I became conscious and aware of what was going on, but the first thing that I remember awaking to was being able to just see again just a sliver of the world around me. Everything seemed dim, and my dad's voice was the first thing I heard, and he was telling me that I had been in a really bad car accident and that both of my femurs were broken and they now housed titanium rods. And that felt like an invasion on my body, just to awaken to the fact that I've already had all these things done to me. And at that point, I don't know if I had the plate under my eye yet, because they had to put in a plate. And because I had all the facial injuries, it did protect me from getting an internal head injury.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
it kind of broke the hit.
Mm.
Whereas my sister Kristen, um, she didn't break any bones in her face, but she did get the closed head injury.
Yeah. It's it's amazing, and in order to tell more about your story, it's so important that we went through this difficult part. And there's more. You can share more, as much or as little as you feel it needs to help us understand. And when something like this happens, it is so life changing. And for somebody who is wanting to know more about your story, I just want to thank you for having the courage to share the raw details of this, going through this, because my crown chakra is lighting up. So spirit is saying that as well. Thanking you for sharing it, so that we can all know that there's more, that bright days do come, which is the name of your book, which I'm so happy. um, so yeah, so continue whatever way you feel you'd like to take um, the direction.
Okay. Well, um,
How long was your, well, let me ask this. How long was your initial recovery? Meaning, like, you, were you in ICU? I would imagine you might have been in ICU.
Yeah, I was in the shock trauma unit and then the ICU. And I don't know how long I was there, but then eventually I was moved to a regular room.
Hmm.
And I was in the hospital for a total of 2 weeks. But then I was directly transported by ambulance to a rehab,
Yeah.
a wheelchair accessible rehab where I lived there for 3 months.
Okay. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense. That makes sense. Wow.
yeah. And during that time, I remember the hospital or the rehab a bit more than I remember the hospital, but it all is, kind of memories, certain memories, and then other things I don't remember. For example, I had some friends who said they came to see me at the hospital, and I don't remember. I Years later, she said, "Oh, when we saw you in the hospital," and I said, "Oh, you came to see me in the hospital? I didn't even know that. Thank you,
Yeah.
but I don't remember that." And so
Well,
my memories are
yeah,
in and out.
when did you find out about Brian's death?
I found out about his death when I was in the hospital, and when I found out, I was asleep in my room, and I don't know what day it was, but I do know that it was after his funeral.
Mm.
So, which has been hard. But I was asleep in my room, whether it was ICU or a regular room, I don't know. But my aunt and my mom came into the room, and I had been sleeping, so it was I was kind of startled and awoken by them coming into the room, and my aunt said, kind of under her breath to my mom, she asked my mom, "Hey, does she know about Brian yet?" And I heard that, and I said, "What? What do you, what about Brian? Oh, what do I need to know about Brian?" And that's when they told me that he had passed and his funeral had already happened. So that was absolutely crushing, and it everything was surreal because I wasn't able to be at his funeral. I
Mm.
was I still I do remember that I couldn't see well still when they had told me that. So everything was dark, and hearing that, it was almost like, I was in the middle of a nightmare.
Mhm.
And uh, when I did finally return home from the rehab, his room was no longer his room, it was my sister's room. And so I never got that chance to go in to his bedroom and see the way he had left it, and touch his stuffed give his stuffed animals a hug, lay in his bed, and just
Yeah.
go through that normal grieving process.
Hmm.
And I feel like funerals also
Yes,
bring some closure because
they do.
you see him for a last time and say your final words, and
Mm.
none of that was available for Kristen and I. And so that was hard for us. And Kristen joined me in the rehab. She was there as well for the first 2 months. She went home a month before I did,
Yeah.
and then yeah,
Well,
so that's been hard.
I know that Brian made himself known to you. And so I would love to hear when you first started to get signs, and what were you feeling about that? And what were they? And did you believe that it was him?
Yeah, well, the very first sign I got from Brian was a few months after I came home from the rehab. And I was driving, and I felt his presence next to me in the passenger seat. I suddenly, it was night and day, and I'd never felt a presence of anyone before. I hadn't really lost any loved ones besides a friend who died in a car accident that I kind of a secret crush I had, but I didn't know him like super well. So this was the first really close person to me who had passed, and I just felt him come in right next to me, and it was amazing to feel his presence. And that let me know that he still existed. I had no question because up until then, I hadn't felt anything. Um, and so, you wonder, are they around? Where are they? Where are they?
Mhm.
And to feel him right there was undeniable. And it was just amazing. And around that same time, I was asleep one night in my bed and I woke up in the middle of the night, alert, completely alert and wide eyed. Normally when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're groggy and you look at the clock and you go back to sleep. But I woke up and I was completely alert and my heart was burning with the most intense feeling of love. It was so strong. I had never felt happier in my entire waking life. And to wake up feeling happier than I'd ever felt
Mhm.
was incredible. And I knew that I had had some kind of experience. And because I had just lost my brother, I knew that it was something with him. And
Mhm.
although I wasn't allowed to remember what that experience was, I was allowed to remember the feeling.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of research over the years on different types of mystical experiences, near
Mhm.
death experiences, out of body experiences, and I have concluded that I had some kind of out of body experience.
Mm.
And
It, it that's an amazing story. Just they, having being connected with spirit myself, I know that feel. I know what that feeling is in your heart when it just
uh,
that love in your heart, and it it is when it first begins to happen. It's kind of surprising. And I've also had been awakened to a very awake state. So it is going from, yeah, it's very, um, it's almost shocking because you're kind of like, what happened? Like, why did I just, suddenly wake up? Uh,
yeah,
we were talking, you and I talked a little bit before we got on, and I was saying that with the horrific injuries that you had, that it is very likely that you had some type of a near death experience during the accident. Do you ever feel that way or think about that? I know, and it's also the idea that you've been so drawn to research those and wanting to know more about those experiences. Could you tell us a little bit, like what made you start doing all of this researching and
yeah. Well, I wanted to know where my brother was. Where
Mhm.
did Brian go? And where are we all eventually going? And so I started researching. I wanted to know where he was. And so I started researching that. And most of the near death experiences that I read about, people would go through a tunnel, they would see a bright light, they would reunite with loved ones. And I had an experience, I have a memory that joined me sometime after the accident. And because my memories were in and out and kind of fragmented because I was under medication, or I was given lots of medications, I was under trauma, all of that kind of blended in with this memory I was left with. And I wasn't sure what it was for a long time because it wasn't your typical NDE with the bright light and the loved ones. But the memory I was left with was of floating in pure darkness. And it sounds scary, but it wasn't. I didn't feel frightened whatsoever. I actually felt like pure consciousness, almost like I was a pair of eyes just floating in outer space, yet there were no stars.
Mhm.
And I felt cradled. I felt like time stood still. And yet I still held my identity. I knew
Mhm.
who I was. And I remember being flooded with knowledge, just a universal knowledge of how everything worked. And when I felt that knowledge, I remember uh, I remember wanting to come back because now I know how to play the game. It was like, oh, this is how it all works. I want to go back and do it now that I know how it works. Unfortunately, that didn't come back with me. But most people who have NDEs, they when they see the bright light and their loved ones, they want to stay. They don't want to come back. So when I started researching NDEs, I didn't think that I had an NDE because my experience was so different. I wanted to come back. I was in this darkness. I didn't see loved ones in a bright light that I remember anyway. And so that was confusing to me for a long time, but through my research over the years, over many, many years, and even up until, I thought I started saying, okay, what was that memory? Was it an out of body? Was it a near death? And because to my knowledge, I had never died during the accident. There was in my medical records, it says there was a point where my pulse was barely detectable. But I've since learned that you can have an NDE during a life-threatening situation, even if you don't flatline. And I
Yeah.
think it's a way, your body is under so much trauma that you your spirit takes respite outside of the body
Hmm.
to escape that trauma until
Yes.
and can go kind of
Yes.
go back and forth during that time.
Yeah.
And so that's the
Yeah.
memory I have of my NDE.
You're doing a beautiful job of explaining it. And, Karen, one of the things is I've never had an NDE. I've had spiritually transformative experiences. But one of the things I've learned from my spirit guide is that we all we experience things differently. And so there isn't, even though there is kind of a pattern to certain, NDEs, that there isn't a pattern to how we connect with spirit. It can come in many, many different ways. And your explanation of your NDE, I mean, that to me is definitely an NDE. There is such, when you are just in that space, that is when you're out of your body, and even if it isn't something that where some people kind of can see that they're really out and they're looking down and watching their bodies be worked on. Um,
Yeah.
and the other thing that you just said that I think is so important, that that they could still detect a pulse on you, and that you could have an NDE while that was happening. And you told in the book the story of someone that reached your brother at the accident, I believe, who felt his spirit leave. Did I read that?
Yes. Yes, you
Can you
did.
share,
Uh-huh.
can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the people who stopped to help at the scene of the accident, my mom retrieved a list of all the volunteers, and a lot of the names were common names, but her name stood out. So as I was writing my book, I thought, I wonder if I can ask her, reach out to find her. So I was able to find her on Facebook, and I sent her a message, and she remembered everything, and she shared with me that she ran over to Brian's side to be with him and to help with what was going on to revive him. And she said that she felt his spirit leave,
Yeah.
which was really hard for me to hear, but also very interesting that she was
Yeah.
in tune enough to feel that moment.
Yeah.
And
It,
so
it is, and I believe that deeply. When David passed away, when my husband passed away. He was literally his sponsor from his last rehab had come to take him back to rehab, and they were walking out to the car. Literally, they were going to take him to the hospital, and he collapsed and died right in that moment. His heart just stopped. But Steve, who was his sponsor, had David's head in the crook of his arm, and he had his ear to his chest, and he felt David's spirit leave his body. And
Oh,
it was
wow.
so when I read that part in your story in your book, I understood that. And yet, and I asked Steve after, I said, "What time was it when you felt David's spirit leave?" And he had told me that it was somewhere around 9 o'clock or a little before 9 o'clock p.m. And yet they took him to the hospital. They got his heart going, and they took him to the hospital, but it wouldn't they couldn't get it. They worked on him and worked on him, and eventually let him go. And but I know what time he really left. And so that is why, you can, what you were saying, there are things they can do to the body to keep it alive. And as hard as it was for your parents, for your dad to let Brian go, Brian had already gone. He was, on the other side. And so that part of the story just really resonated with me, because that it was so comforting for me, because I wasn't with David when he died, and to know that somebody who loved him deeply and they loved each other was there and felt his spirit leave was it just made me think of Brian. When I read that, those two came together for me.
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting. And yeah, I've never experienced that myself either. And to know that that woman was there by Brian's side, other than just the ambulance crew, it was nice to know there was this caring mom that was right there when that happened.
You
And
know, she may have made it feel safe for him to leave. She may,
oh, yeah,
because when we cross over, there, especially in those, and this is all coming from spirit, but when we cross over in those accident trauma moments, we are, there is no preparation for the one that's leaving their body, and so it is. I would imagine that the our instinct to survive and stay alive is fighting with our spirits, recognizing that it's time, and that there's probably conflict, even if it is nobody can describe it, even if it can't be described, that there's conflict about leaving. So it's, who knows, maybe she was an angel. We know she was an angel just to be by his
yes,
side.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that it, well, how, so at the beginning of the conversation you were saying that that you were changed, and you and I talked a little bit about uh, religion beforehand, just about. I was raised Catholic, and I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I take some of my traditions and things that I learned in there with me, but they're not open to the spiritual experience for me, being the spiritual person that I am. And so I had to leave that behind. And I'm curious about how you are managing, or how you managed your life as all of this was happening to you as a young girl of only 18.
Yeah, so I was raised in the LDS religion, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon religion. And I had been religious my whole life up until the accident. And I did find that when you have an NDE, some of the common after effects are that you become more spiritual over religious. You also can have increased intuition, empath, empathetic more empathetic tendencies, and um, you're much more spiritual. And so those things I had found happened to me. And there was a church. My mom told me that they held church, the LDS church there on Sundays in the rehab. And so when she first told me that, I was really excited. And I said, "Oh, they have church here on Sundays. Okay, I'm going to go." And I went, and I just remember sitting there in my wheelchair, and I felt like something had been taken out of me. It no longer resonated with me. And I had walked such a straight line my whole life. And the realization hit me that, oh my gosh, I almost died. I came so close to death. Yet, because I had followed such a straight line and just kind of did what I was told and followed along, I don't feel like I truly lived. I don't feel like I ever truly made my own choices and decided for myself what felt right and what didn't feel right. And so the accident changed me. It woke me up to realizing that life is so short, and I almost died, and I wanted to live my life. I wanted to make my own choices and carve my own path instead of just following the path that the church kind of lays out for you.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make my own. And
Yeah.
that was a pivotal moment for me with my religion when I attended that meeting that day in my wheelchair.
Yeah. That's so powerful. And it's powerful because I don't think that it when that happens, and that didn't happen as dramatically for me, but there was this leaving. I felt the church was made by man, not by God, or the box that the church. But it is that turning away and moving towards this spiritual side. Something just seems to draw you to let me just keep learning more. I just want to know more, and that definitely was the experience for me. I remember buying the book, and I was just sharing this yesterday on another podcast. Buying the book. The Birth of Christianity, because I was trying to understand how the Catholic Church became the Catholic Church, and how, because we were, just like you said, by the time we came along, the church has been here for centuries and centuries, and, thousands of years. And so everything was already laid out. So there was we didn't have, not only we didn't have choices, but we didn't get to see how it was formed. It was just already done before we got there. And
Yeah.
so I think that when dramatic things happen to us, and sometimes they're physical, like the accident that you had. And for me, it was going through David's addiction and the chaos and uncertainty that caused in our family, that took me to the brink, and the accident took you. And when we get to those pivotal moments, we often that's where our spiritual experiences begin to happen, and we begin to realize there's more, that it's not just uh, it's not just what we were taught. Because as a Catholic, I was taught, I can talk this way, I can pray, that's what I can do, I can pray, but I can't receive, at least not in I'm just asking for somebody to do something, but I don't get any real confirmation back. It is just a one-way conversation. um,
Yes, that's such a good explanation. That's how I felt too. And my prayers were almost, I felt like, now looking back, that my prayers were almost just kind of you know, almost, how do I say it? Kind of memorized. It was
yeah.
like, thank you for this day. and please bless my family and da 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 and amen.
Yeah.
And now when I pray, it's more like, because I've learned that communication on the other side is telepathic, my prayers now are more of a almost a meditation.
Yeah.
I I just feel what I'm thankful for. It's deep moments of gratitude.
Hmm.
And I know that spirit knows what I am needing help with. And so, and I don't state it all out like I used to with words. I just kind of feel it all and know that they know how I'm feeling and what I'm needing.
Hmm.
And I say they is, I pray to what I envision as God now is more of an energy rather than a man sitting on a throne.
Hmm.
And I also envision that that, my guardian angels, my
Hmm.
spirit guides, my loved ones, I picture almost as an open meeting where
Hmm.
I'm kind of directing it towards God, but any of them can come in and assist with whatever I'm needing and be there and listen. And
Yeah.
so
That's that,
I feel so much more connected now,
yes. Well, it's funny when you're talking about a meeting when I used when I was in the throes of his illness. I used the rosaries. What I brought used. I actually heard a medium talk about it, and he said that he used the rosary as a meditation before he would go out to be with a group that he was going to read, and I used to imagine all of my ancestors sitting around a table with me
Oh,
while I was doing the rosary. And I was using the rosary to help me go to sleep at night because I was so, the days were so chaotic and uncertain. And, I never felt like it, I always felt like something waiting for the other foot to drop kind of. And so, yeah, so it's that. And I do believe that I have a guide that is with me, but they are, it's kind of like they're a little bit of the director for the crowd that is around me. And you know I want to share that you and I met at the IANDS conference last year, and that we stumbled on each other as we were the very first. I think it was the first night of the conference.
I
Um,
think it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I had just gotten there. I knew nobody. I was trying to find something to eat just so I could go back to my room and get ready for the next day. And I met you and your mom, who had both come to the conference. And so I'd like to know, how is your mom, and how is she doing after? Because I didn't know this story last year. So how is she doing now? She was so lovely to meet. Both of you were so lovely to meet. So,
Thank
looking
you.
back and now knowing this story, I wish I knew some of it then.
Yeah, my mom, she is doing so good. She is the strongest woman that I know. She's the definition of a true warrior. Um, she also became more spiritual
Mm-hmm.
than religious after the accident. It took her a little bit, a couple of years after I kind of took that direction. She Then she stepped into it. She loves organized religion. So
Hmm.
she actually attends the Unity Church, which is a
Yeah,
non-denominational.
that's a great, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, she loves it.
Hmm.
And she joined, after the accident, she joined a mother's grief group,
Mm.
which helped her tremendously. And the leader of the grief group, she, my mom was meeting with her at this one day, and my mom heard in her head, "She is your mentor." And my mom thought, "What? How would she be my mentor? I'm not going to be a grief counselor, how's this all going to work out?" But she just trusted it and was curious to see what would happen. And eventually her grief counselor coached my mom and certified her in hypnotherapy. And with the hypnotherapy certification, it allowed her to, I can't remember the logistics of how it all worked, but for whatever reason, she had to get certified as a minister, which kind of acted as a liability for
Mhm.
being a hypnotherapist. It was something like that. So she became a certified minister, and she thought, oh, well, I'll never, I'm just using it for the legalities, but I'm never going to do weddings. I don't like speaking, and I don't see myself doing that. But a friend that knew my mom was certified was getting married and asked my mom to marry her and her fiance. And so my mom accepted, and she was hooked. She she loved doing it so much. And so that's what set her on her journey of becoming a wedding minister. She's done over 1,000 weddings now.
You're
And
kidding.
yeah, and it is like it brings her so much joy.
Yeah. What's so funny is I feel like Brian was behind a lot of that.
I do too.
Yeah, he just wanted to, because when they cross over, there's still, he's part of him is still the 9-year-old boy that you remember, but he is also a spirit, a bigger spirit, because it was, we all have more than one life. So, this one for him, for whatever reason, he was meant to end it early. But so the bigger Brian, because that's, I'm kind of getting like the bigger Brian is the one that wanted to make sure that both of you, all of you, were. He knew that his passing was going to bring you into this realm of wanting to know more and understand more. And so
Yeah.
it is. So he is. Yeah, he's very, very happy with your mom doing the being in the weddings. I was so wish I knew this last year, and
Oh,
I
I-
think what we've been. It's amazing how time flies, but as we're talking, but it is just how this spiritual. Those of us that have been become more spiritual. I hate to use the word spiritual even because people have certain connotations around it. But as I have grown, my awareness, my consciousness has grown, we just get drawn to the people who have the same feelings that we do. And these conversations open, and I'm so grateful that we connected and that
you.
you were able to come. I do want to say the Bright Days Do Come is Karen's book. She's an amazing writer. Even in the first few chapters, it's just drawn right in to her story, just the way she shares it. And it's so important. Stories are how we learn. And what you're trying to teach is that there's more, and that sometimes when we experience some of these really difficult things in our lives, that we open to bigger things and bigger questionings and bigger seeking. So is there, I'm going to also put up, I'm going to take down the Bright Days Do Come and put up your website just to have that too. So this is
Thank you.
Karen's website, but is there anything you would love to leave with those that are listening to just about your journey and how you're feeling now after coming through all this?
Yeah. Well, it took me many years to realize that I needed to get my hospital records. I had never had any of them, and when I got them, I was able to read through and see all the surgeries I had, and one of the reports began with this unfortunate young woman, da da
Mhm.
da da da, and it went on. And if I had been conscious enough at the time, I would have agreed with that. But now, 33 years later, I look at that and I would not agree that I was such an unfortunate young woman, because the accident, although it was so much trauma and losing my brother and all of that was very, very hard, it has made me who I am. today. It has helped me find strength, has helped me find the preciousness in life. I hug my kids tighter. I cherish every day. That day in the car, I didn't know would be the last time I'd see my brother in this earthly life. So it has taught me to treat every interaction as if it's the last time. So
Mm,
it has really helped me grow a lot, and it's helped me. I didn't share any of the signs that I've gotten from Brian, but he's given my family and I so many incredible signs. And you know, I've learned that at first they happened spontaneously, but I have learned over the years that you can ask for signs. And asking is so important because when you ask, it sets the stage because your loved one knows what to give you and you
right.
know what to expect instead of if they were to give you a feather or a coin, you might overlook that or you might think, oh, that's not a sign. But when you ask for a specific sign and they deliver, there's no doubt that it's them. And feeling that connection with my brother has been incredible and has just shown me that he's right there. And
Yeah. Well,
that's
yeah.
been an amazing part of my journey.
Yeah. And I look forward, I love bringing guests back on again because, we start conversations and then we grow more and there's more things to talk about. So, I would love to have you come back. And I suspect, author Karin McClean, that you probably have another book in you. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see that. But thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me. And I want to thank everyone for joining us here. I'm Bernadette Thompson. This is how I made it through. Please like or share. I'm so happy that you're with us today, and please come back again.